We have a very unique opportunity here in this next session to hear from some authors, some scholars who have written some exceptional works that were published in the Names Journal. As we read through, or as we go through this session, I'll share the works of these authors in the chat as well, so you can click through to their articles. But we've invited these scholars here today to share some of their work, either directly related to the article that they published, or a little bit more about their work beyond the article itself. So our first paper today comes from Lennart Chevallier and Sören Wichmann. And the title of the presentation today is called Mapping Place Names. The article that they submitted to Names, a Journal of Onomastics, is a note on the toponym R package, a practical introduction. And that was published just this last year in Names. I'll place that here. So I'll pass this over to Dan, who will run the video of the lecture from Lennart and Sören.
Good morning, everyone. Here to my right is Lennart Chevallier, and I am Sören Wichmann. We are very excited and happy to be able to present our work today on the development of a software package which can be used for toponymic research. So we're going to present that package along with some case studies of how it would look when you apply it. Part of this has been published already as a practical introduction to our software in the Names Journal, and more will be published later. But let's dive into how the talk is going to be structured.
Yeah, I begin with a brief introduction to place names in general, and move on to the geonames resource, that is the data resource which underlies our package. And I give the nuts and bolts of our package, so some basic functions I will explain. Then Sören will take over and provide 2 case studies, and I give some concluding remarks. So why study the distribution of toponyms? In general, one can say that place names usually reveal something about the language of people that occupy a certain space. And it is notable that in most cases, these place names will not simply be replaced, even if the ethnic profile changes over time, but the orthographic shape may be altered. We notice that in most studies of toponymics, that they are about single or individual names in a certain region, while we see distributional studies in way fewer cases. So outlining our approaches to toponomastics, you can think of it of a particularistic approach and pattern-seeking approach. The particularistic one focuses on individual meanings and the history of the place names. And this involves then intensive historical linguistic work, philological work, and archival work, unearthing the latest attestations, while our pattern-seeking approach focuses more on the frequency of certain elements. And this then also includes generic elements, as well as mapping those. These approaches are complementary and not to be seen as mutually exclusive. So about the geonames resource, that is essentially a large aggregate of a multitude of resources with names for countries all over the world, and they distinguish certain feature classes. Here on the right, you can see a graph of these feature classes. The red bar shows the number of entries pertaining to the P feature class that involves city and place, like village names. But we also have hydronyms, that is the green bar, and even less so, for example, names for roads and railroads, that is the brown bar with the label R. The package has a number of functions. On the right, you can see already a map that was produced with our package, showing hydronymic terms in the United States. So branch is the red one, run is green, and brook is blue, are the blue points. And this was also done with the geonames resources. Here you can, in addition to this function, also use others where you can find frequent toponyms in a certain country, in multiple countries, specified areas, and also compare them together with a statistical analysis. So to give a more concrete example, here you can see on the right a map of all places ending in "bu" in the United Kingdom. That means as much as town in Scandinavian languages, and it may be an indicator of where Viking presence was concentrated. So to get such a map, you type a command into the R environment, like the one in the orange font here, which I will talk about more in a moment. But whenever you do that, you also get a data frame. And the data frame would look like this. The highlighted column in red is the name column. That is also the one that is filtered by default. So if you want to look for a certain ending like "bu", this is where you the program looks. And then you can see the full names. There's more information like ASCII name version, alternate names that you can also look through, as well as the coordinates and so on. So about the command, it works like this. Minimally, you have to provide a string to look for as a regular expression. So here again is another example in the orange font, hum with a dollar sign. Dollar sign means that this has to be at the end of the place name. And then you also provide country names as an ISO code or as a full name. So here GBIE means the United Kingdom Islands. So you can also look in multiple countries at once. Another function that we have is the toponym frequency, it means function, where you here, for example, see the most frequent 3-character endings in the United Kingdom. Len, here the parameter means length. So you have to specify the length of 3 or 2 or 4. Here we use 3. And then you also say how many of these endings you want. So limit 10 means the top 10 most frequent endings. Then you just get a table and with the occurrences, and you can then also to see not only the frequency, but also the distribution, use these endings again with the mapping function from before and get a map again, like on the right. To navigate through our package and these functions, because there are other parameters that I just haven't talked about now, you can just type in question mark and top into the R environment. Then you see the information, or just question mark and the specific function name to find more out about it. Now, Sören will take over and say a few words about Guatemala and Germany.
Yeah, so now we're going to put the software to the test and see what is it really good for, what are the advantages and the limitations. The first case study is from Guatemala. There's a small language family called Xincan there, which has been studied by Campbell, among other people. And he has been publishing basically the same stuff over and over again for more than 50 years, proposing that there are place names that indicate a former greater extension of Xincan than what the current presence of the languages would indicate. So Xincan was formerly a bigger family, spoken in a greater area, and the toponyms in the area are presumably the evidence for that. But Campbell never published a map throughout all these years. Furthermore, he actually based his ideas in part on somebody called Thompson, who in 1970 published some ideas about certain place names being indicated, being associated with a certain ethnic group, but again, without publishing any maps. So let's go into the story and see how our maps that we can generate can shed new light on the whole thing. So starting with Thomson, 1970, proposed that various names containing agua in the end could reflect as a certain ethnic group. So he talks about Eastern Guatemala, Western Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and mentions lots and lots of names, as you can see in this list, but never providing a map and only referring generically to these different countries or parts of countries. So exactly where are all these places? Now we can put in these names in search strings into our software, and we get out a map like this. And that's, of course, very useful because now we can see that the area that Thomson actually refers to is mainly El Salvador and Honduras, and a little bit into the adjacent countries. But it's a very large area, actually. Now, Schinker later on said, okay, Thomson has an interesting idea here. Some of these names could actually pertain to a certain ethnic group, namely the Chinkans. There's a Xinca word, Shawe, meaning town. And that might actually be related to many of these agua endings. And Campbell talked about Pasasagua, Jagua, Antigua, Anchagua, Shawa, Conchagua, Manzaragua, all of these could contain Shawe town. That all sounds very well when you read it on paper, but when you produce a map, now you see that all these names are actually in a very large area, a bit like the area that Thomson talked about. And the Xincan languages are in this area to the left, to the west here inside Guatemala, and not all over this place. So even if Xincan formerly had a greater extension than it has now, this is a bit too much. And actually, when we look into the particular names, we find that it can't really be true because Jagua actually means it refers to a certain kind of tree in the local Spanish. So some of these could be Xincan, some of them might not be. Campbell also talked about other names that can be etymologized in Xincan that don't have agua in them. And these names are all in this restricted area where modern Xincan languages are also or used to be spoken. So that fits well, and it's nice to see a map of these that was not available before. As I mentioned, this particular restricted area does correspond to historically attested Xincan languages. And it so happens that this area is not, the area of the place names is not much bigger than or it's actually seems to be smaller than the area of the historically attested languages. Now let's summarize here. What have we learned? Well, it seems that these agua names mentioned by Thomson, it seems unlikely that they can all be related to some particular ethnic group. It seems that Campbell is right in assuming that some of them could be Xincan, but he was wrong about some other ones also in agua, like Jagua. But actually, he doesn't really take them into account in his story. He ignores them since he can do that because he didn't have a map and he didn't have to say, okay, please ignore those to the east in this big area and only look to the ones in the west. So it's a little bit confusing, all this. Some things are right, some things are wrong in what Campbell proposed, but we can navigate in all of this much better now that we have a possibility to generate maps. So I hope you weren't too confused about all of this. We're now moving on to another area, which is closer to us, maybe further away from where you're sitting, some of you. So we're moving to Eastern Germany. So we are right now sitting, and you can look out of the window. This is northern Germany where we're sitting. But around the 6th century, Slavic people moved into Eastern Germany, and we are sitting pretty much at the limit of where they, settled. The main evidence for their presence comes from place names, because the languages are largely gone today, and the populations have assimilated, mixed, and so today it looks like everything is like ethnic German, but underlying this, there's still, of course, indirect presence of the Slavic people who just assimilated and lost their languages. The study of Slavic toponyms is very well researched. It was particularly popular during the DDR times, where, of course, it was okay to talk about Slavic people as being present in Germany. It wasn't so popular before those times. In any case, we know a lot about these names, and the question is, can our package, our software, can it help us in any way to elucidate the area further? Now, let's try and see what happens when we just map these known suffixes. So it is the first one. It's I don't know if you heard about Chemnitz. It used to be called Karl-Marx-Stadt. Kamenitz was the original form, meaning something like place of the stone. So there's tons of these names in its, and most of these are in the eastern area where we would expect them, knowing something about the historical presence of Slavic people. Some of them also towards the west. And here our software can help us quickly to look at what are the names that are found, for instance, to the west of the 10th longitude. And we can generate a data frame of those and get out the list of names. And you see that some of them are simply monosyllabic forms that, like bits and tits and schlitz, which certainly don't contain an it suffix. And others are like St. Maurits, that are definitely not Slavic names. Others might be. But so a lot of these dots to the west should be eliminated. That's not clear when we see this map first. So we need to dive into the data a little bit more to filter our results in some cases. The limitations of the underlying data become more glaring when we map the O suffix. This is again a generic place name suffix, and it's found, according to our map, mainly in the north, but actually it was found further to the south and still is, but it has other orthographic shapes, probably due to changes in pronunciation, orthographic changes. So a lot of places in Au, O reflect the same suffix, but we just can't know that directly from our database. Our database only contains current names and the shapes they have today. And so we would need to do more particularistic research in order to add more names. It's difficult with our database because lots of places in R and E and O, those names have other origins than O. Some of them come from O, some of them come from other things. A third suffix is in, famously contained in Berlin, which means something like the swampy place or something like that. Again, the distribution seems to be mainly in the north, but actually it was more widely distributed. It's just that, again, orthographic changes, pronunciation changes, which are difficult to tease apart, have masked the shape of the suffix. Finally, we have direct sort of evidence without even knowing anything about etymologies. Some places are called Wendisch, and then you have a name of a town following that. So Wendisch means something like Slavic, so the Slavic something village. Many of these occur in pairs with Deutsch village, so German. So we have these pairs of villages that are called respectively Deutsch and Wendisch. And what's the historical background of that? Well, it seems that when German people moved towards the east in later times, they would sort of push Slavic people a little bit out of their places to neighboring villages or new settlements nearby the original settlement. So they pushed them there, and those places would then be called Wendisch, the Slavic ex-place, and the place that was taken over by the Germans would have added Deutsch. Similar pairs are called Groß something and Klein something, so big something, Klein something, where the big village was the German village and the Klein village was the place to where people were sort of pushed away. Unfortunately, we can't just map Groß and Klein, but we can do that, but that would include a lot of pairs of places that are called Groß and Klein for other reasons than this Slavic German contact background. Putting all this together, we can generate a map using the 4 kinds of phenomena that relate to Slavic presence. And this map will show us quite faithfully where was the presence of Slavic people earlier on. That's a nice thing, and it's super easy and quick to do. It's also nice. But of course, we've seen some shortcomings. The historically attested forms that would allow us to identify sub-areas, like, for instance, dialects of Slavic, giving us more detail, they're not available. And a lot of the variation we see is now probably more due to German dialectal variation than the Slavic dialectal variation. So actually, we started out playing with these data in the hope that we would be able to say something more about different Slavic varieties. But for that, we need more in-depth studies, and our software is only going to be able to sort of help us a little bit towards that goal.
Yeah, to give some concluding remarks, following up on that, you could see that toponym is a good companion to evaluate past hypotheses, even in a well-studied area. But as Sören just mentioned, the main problem lies, at least for some of these studies, that we don't have the older attestations or the older names, and new names only provide the contemporary orthographic changes. In regard to future perspectives, we want to look into generic elements in toponyms all across the world. Concerning the package itself, you could see that all the maps we've shown were in black and white, which can also be quite useful, but we would like to incorporate other map types as well that can show some geographical and ecological information. Lastly, we would also like to permanently include other data sources than the GeoName source, because that is currently the only available one, except for the fact that you can still import custom data sets if you have them. So if you want to try out the package, we recommend doing it from within R with these commands in the top left. But you can also get a more detailed introduction to it here via the GitHub link, and also in the note that was published in Names with following that link there. And here lastly, some of the references.
Yes, and as you can see, our note is listed here as number 2 in the list, and our forthcoming paper as the last one. So thanks a lot for your attention. This is where the recording stops and where the real people will be available for questions and for replying to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and we'll welcome the real folks to our discussion. Both Sören and Lennart are here, and thank you both very much for being here today. Anybody here would like to start with a question?
I have a comment. I am just so glad to see this work. And I have to say that when you first sent it in, my heart just soared, because it does precisely what I think onomastics can do at its very best, which is to move beyond intuition and personal observation, and to really test our assumptions about the world. And I think that you have offered other name scholars such a powerful tool to test some of the theories that they have about place naming. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing the gift of your research.
Much appreciated.
And it's lovely to see your faces, because we've only had contact. We've only had contact with the net.
Gleichweise.
I see, Andreas, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you for sharing with us the tool and all the information about it. It's really fascinating. I was just wondering, I mean, it's mainly curiosity, and apologies if you mentioned something relevant which I missed, but I was wondering to what extent you have applied or you have used your tool for historical place names from older times. To what extent, I mean, the tool can become efficient, or perhaps to what extent historical toponomastics can actually inform the progress of the tool.
Well, we try to give an example from the German place names where it is historical names, it's old names, going back to the medieval times. But we can only look at them through their current shapes. So we don't have, we didn't, work with, say, a database of old place names, something like that. But that can be done. No. So you can easily have like an Excel sheet of some names and their coordinates. Those are the two things that you do need to have. Some names and some coordinates, and then you can map them. You can use the tool for mapping them, and you could sort of mix them with the other data that's already available in some way. And it could also be a permanent feature of the package to have such data. So I mean, I'm kind of, if I were to fantasize about, what ideally could do is to have like a big community-driven project where you collected a lot of data on place names, but it has to be some kind of community-driven thing, or a large project, but no, large projects that are funded, stop when the funding stops. And yeah, it's really up to people what they want to do, and then that could be done.
Because I was thinking of the ancient place names ancient place names, especially in Europe, which some of them have been transformed, or some of them have been influenced by the multilingualism that followed. And to what extent, I mean, your project sounds fascinating, and it could lead to wonderful conclusions with regards to how place names change over time and how they've been replaced, and then would lead to qualitative analysis of them as well. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I may get in touch at some point and pick your brains further about it, because I think that the data exists, but has never been exploited in the way you just presented it, and I think that it would be very fruitful. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe this. The existence of a tool like this might then encourage people to make that data more systematically available in more systematic form. Presently, you can probably get maps of whatever the ancient world. You work on Latin, right? So
yeah.
You know more about those sources than I do, but presumably those are mainly maps and not Excel sheets. Or like ideally we would want to have just simple text files.
Yeah.
And then we can start doing stuff.
Good. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you both for your work. Thanks to the room for the comments and questions.